Yesterday, the Cup Series went and raced in Sonoma. Kyle Larson dominated, and it was all around a pretty good race. But there's something that really stood out to me. Now, it stood out for a couple weeks. Many people have talked about it, but I want to throw my hat in the ring on this. And it was Fox's bad coverage. Fox, for the longest time, has been known as almost the gold standard of NASCAR coverage. But in the past couple years, they've really fallen off. And this year, it's just fallen completely off the cliff. And, well, we can't really fix it at this point. There's one weekend left. There's not really much that can be done for the year. They got what they got next week. But what can be done is the continuous improvement of NBC. NBC has had a tumultuous history with NASCAR, whether it be from the first stint it had from 2001 to 2006, or this current stint that started in 2015. Now, what I want to do today is kind of point out how NBC's coverage can be better than Fox's this year if they only do a couple of things. Now, I'm going to split it up to three categories here. Number one, cleaning up last year's issues. Number two, emulating their coverage of the 2021 Indy 500. And number three, avoiding Fox's issues. So let's start up with last year's issues. Last year, with the pandemic going on, stuff was absolutely nuts, and I completely understand NBC having a bit of a fall off. I get that. So a lot of these are things that are gonna be cleaned up, but I think they should still be gone over. So, number one, they need to have the broadcasters at the track. Now, I know that this was changed up due to COVID policies last year, but this should be back to normal as of this year. Rick Allen, Jeff Burton, Steve Letarte, and Dale Jr. need to be at the track. It was completely evident last year that especially Dale Jr. struggled from not being at the track in person. The energy just wasn't there. And I'd have to say he was probably the one who took the biggest regression down in the races he couldn't attend in person. So I think that having that energy from the racetrack is going to help out a lot. Now, number two, they need to cut down the clutter in the booth. Now, what I mean by this is too many voices going on at once. There's a lot of yelling, a lot of people talking over each other, and just too much going on. Whether it's 3 people in the booth or 4, the combinations at times just became overwhelming for me as a viewer and for a lot of other viewers. So I think that having maybe Dale Jr., Steve Letarte, and Rick Allen, or swapping out Jr. and Burton, whoever it may be, needs to be done during these races. Find different ways to broadcast these races that most other broadcast partners wouldn't do. They used to do this around 2017, 2018, and I really enjoy it, especially with the radio broadcast style. And I think that trying to think outside the box is the best way to get fans on NBC's side. And then my last one, and this is especially critical for the end of the year, is spread the viewership around the field. Listen, I know that it's the final races of the season, going down to the wire for the championship. But there are more than 8 or 12 cars, or for the last race, 4 cars on the track. I know that championship implications are a big thing with NBC, but I think that also they're not going to have a championship implication every single lap. Someone getting passed on lap 14 of a 500-lap race at Bristol isn't going to make that big of a difference when you know that there's 486 laps to go. So, really, viewing different drivers who are outside the playoffs or who have been eliminated from the playoffs at whatever point it may be is going to be huge. The way that they cover the field leading up to the playoffs is how they need to continue covering it during them. Now, the second major grouping of things that needs to be done is really to emulate NBC's coverage of the 2021 Indy 500. Listen, I am not a diehard IndyCar fan, so maybe this was just their once-a-year great broadcast, but I'll tell you what, it impressed me. So, one big thing is limit commercials to when they're absolutely needed. There's 2 stage breaks, so you can do full-screen commercials during those. They're literally put into the races for commercial breaks. So you know what? Take the opportunity. And I get sometimes if there's a lull in the action, having a commercial break is fitting. but they can't do what Fox did and just go completely nuts with it. So utilize side-by-side breaks more. NBC did a great job of this at the Indy 500, and we really didn't get to miss a single bit of the action. So we need to keep this going into the NASCAR side of the season. I think part of the reason that myself as a non-IndyCar fan was so invested in what was going on in the Indy 500, again, I really didn't have a dog in the fight. I think the reason I was invested is because I didn't miss anything. I constantly was seeing the progression of the race play out in front of me, and that needs to be done more with NASCAR races. Like the Sonoma race, for instance. I thought that it was a really great race, but a lot of the time, I had to resort to Twitter to get updates from people at the track on what was going on. That shouldn't happen in this day and age. We're at a day and age where side-by-side commercial breaks are accepted, where different ways of advertising on screen, whether it be on YouTube or on Twitter or on Instagram, are accepted. So finding different ways to get those broadcast partners in without really interrupting the broadcast too much is critical in my opinion. Also, stay on topic. That's something that the Indy 500 broadcast was perfect with. They stayed on topic. They talked about what was going on the track. There wasn't a bunch of anecdotal evidence about any little thing going on or trying to make different stories. It was just about the racing. And it was perfect because you could have little bits of levity here and there, but you also had to be serious and take this sport seriously. Well, NBC should do the same thing, in my opinion, with NASCAR. And also, just let the broadcast breathe when it should. That's something that really surprised me, is when there wasn't something that needed to be talked about, there wasn't talking. I personally really like that. I like when broadcasters let me just hear the ambience of the race. To me, that's something that really stands out when it comes to football or baseball or basketball at times. And it's something that sets the great broadcasters apart from the good ones. Now the last one are the issues that Fox had that they can avoid. The first one, way too much talking. Like I talked about, let the broadcast breathe. It seemed like a lot of the time during Fox's portion of the season so far, Clint Bowyer or Jeff Gordon or Mike Joy would just talk to talk. It kind of reminded me of when I'd watch baseball games over the summer from ESPN. And I'm not going to harp too much on ESPN, but they have a lot of the same problems nowadays with their sports coverage that Fox has. They just talk and talk and talk. I know that's ironic coming from me, but I just can't stand hearing it when it's not needed. And that's something I think that Rick Allen and Jeff Burton and Dale Jr. and Steve Letarte can really learn from Fox on. And it just leads to also too many gimmicky things. NASCAR already, for a lot of fans, is filled to the brim with gimmicks. So we don't need it in our broadcast. We don't need to see Clint Bowyer spiking a Super Bowl trophy because he's upset his Chiefs lost months later. We don't need to see all of these dumb games between Clint Bowyer and Jeff Gordon. I get the first few were fun, but after a while it grew old. Cover the race's stories before, during, and after the race. The different implications that somebody blowing an engine would have. The implications, for instance, that somebody getting passed with 50 to go in a 500-lap race would have. That's something that NBC has shown a lot of promise at before, but I think last year did regress greatly in. Now, this is one strictly for Fox, but I think that it can be applied to any broadcaster. Jeff Gordon just has not improved at all in 6 years. He doesn't know really what to say too many of the times. He stutters a lot on the broadcast. He will just add awkward lines in, and a lot of the times he's incredibly biased. He's even said as much. So, for the broadcasters coming in, they just need to focus on their problems. Look at the things that they did wrong, watch over the broadcast, whatever it may be, and fix that. And I think that's something that NBC seems to be a lot better with. Rick Allen might get a lot of crap from fans, but you know what? He is a lot better at broadcasting these races than he was in 2015, and I applaud him for that. I don't think he's a bad broadcaster. I didn't think he was a bad broadcaster then, but he's gotten better over the years. And someone I kind of compare him to is Adam Alexander. Adam Alexander was not a well-liked person when he was broadcasting for TNT, but I've noticed a lot of people warming up to him more, myself included. So I think that Rick Allen and all of the members of the NBC broadcast just need to continue to improve on what they were weak with the year before, whether that's maybe being too jokey with it and maybe reining that back, or if they're too serious, maybe lightening up, whatever that might be. Now, this one also is for Fox, and I hope to God that NBC gets this cleared up, unlike Fox. The scoring ticker going haywire every week drives me mad as a viewer. Now, I want to clarify something. I know that when they're switching back and forth, there can be battles back and forth between different drivers. So say Ross Chastain is battling against Ryan Preece, and they just keep going back and forth on the ticker. I'm going to assume as a viewer that one is passing the other. It's a good side-by-side battle. But when I see, for instance, Ryan Newman running 25th the lap before, and then all of a sudden he vaults up to second on the chart and then vaults back down, that to me just proves that Fox, for instance, wasn't ready to broadcast that race. That their graphics department or whatever it may be, maybe it's NASCAR scoring for all I know, wasn't up to par. NBC needs to completely sew this thing up. Because for me as a viewer, it gets really annoying trying to figure out where someone is, and then all of a sudden they keep shifting back and forth when somebody or some people who aren't even on the same lap get put up higher. It's been a problem for Fox for years, but this year it was awful. That for me covers all of it really though. That's what I think NBC needs to focus on for their NASCAR coverage to be better than Fox's was this year. I really don't think it's a high bar to get over, but I think that basics need to be covered heading into the final 20 races of the season. So now, I want to pass this one on to you. How would you grade Fox's 2021 NASCAR coverage? Let me know down in the comments below. While you're at it, leave a like, subscribe to this channel, and you know what? Just have a good one.